The desert sun hammered down on the flight line like a physical force, turning every metal surface into a scorching thread. Through the heat shimmer rising of the tarmac, she looked like just another ground crew member in a fuel-stained flight suit, wrestling a heavy fuel hose back onto its reel. Nobody noticed her, watching the F-16S with the intensity of a predator studying prey. Captain Morrison's boots hit the concrete as he climbed down from his freshly fueled jet, helmet tucked under one arm, swagger in every step. He flashed that trademark pilot grin, the one that came standard issue, with gold wings and a guaranteed seat at every officer's club bar. Hot enough to fry an egg on the wing today, Raise? She didn't look up from coiling the hose. Hot enough to fry the whole damn chicken, sir. He laughed, already turning away, his attention shifting to the actually important things in his world. PI flight checks, radio frequencies, the weekend poker game. To him, she was furniture. Useful furniture, sure, but about as likely to fly one of these birds as the fuel truck itself. What Captain Morrison didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the woman refueling his jet had more flight hours than half the rookie pilots on base. That hidden in her barracks locker was a logbook documenting hundreds of hours earned at a civilian flight school, paid for with money scraped together from 3 part-time jobs and a determination that burned hotter than any afterburner. But civilian credentials meant nothing in the rigid hierarchy of military aviation. Ground crew was where they'd assigned her, and ground crew was where she'd proven herself indispensable in all the ways that didn't matter when it came to actually flying. The flight line hummed with its usual symphony, fuel pumps drumming their deep bass notes through underground pipes, pneumatic tools chattering in nearby hangars, radio chatter creating a constant background static of coordinates and confirmations. After 18 months working this line, she could read these sounds like a language, understanding the difference between routine operations and something more serious brewing. Today's mission was milk run simple. Standard reconnaissance along the edge of friendly airspace, clear weather, minimal threat level, the kind of patrol where the biggest danger was falling asleep from boredom at 30,000 feet. You ever think about actually flying one of these things? Lieutenant Davis stood beside his aircraft, young enough that his uniform still looked brand new, his grin carrying the uncomplicated enthusiasm of someone who'd never seen real combat. She paused in her work, met his eyes directly. Every single day, he laughed like she told a particularly good joke, sealed his canopy, and taxied toward the runway. Within minutes, 6 fighters were airborne, disappearing into the pale desert sky like steel arrows shot from an invisible bow. She made her notations in the maintenance log, calculated how much time until lunch rotation, and was mentally planning her afternoon equipment checks when the world exploded into chaos. The scramble alarm split the air like a chainsaw through silk. The distinctive rising wail transformed casual conversation into sprint-level urgency. Ground crews froze for 1 heartbeat, brains processing the implications, then burst into motion with the coordinated precision of a NASCAR pit crew. Something had crossed the line, and it wasn't planning to ask permission. The flight line erupted. Ground personnel abandoned their tasks, sprinting toward the standby aircraft that had been warming on the tarmac. Engines whined to life. Weapons crews appeared from nowhere, loading missiles onto hardpoints with practice speed. Radio chatter exploded into a controlled cacophony of orders and acknowledgements. But there was a problem. Lead pilots grounded with hydraulic failure. Someone barked into a radio headset, frustration cracking through professional composure. Anderson took a bird strike 20 minutes ago. Who's qualified to lead this scramble? The question hung in the air like smoke from a crashed aircraft. She dropped her fuel gloves onto the wheel and started walking toward the ready hangar. Not running, walking, with the kind of purposeful stride that suggested she'd already made a decision and wasn't interested in debating it. Raise, where the hell are you going? A crew chief grabbed her arm. We need all hands on deck for the Jet 3 is armed and fueled, she said without breaking stride. I'll take it. He stared at her like she'd just announced plans to sprout wings and fly to the moon using only the power of positive thinking. She pulled her arm free and kept walking, her boots ringing against concrete with the rhythm of inevitability. The ladder up to Jet 3 felt like climbing toward destiny. Each rung brought her closer to something she'd been preparing for her entire career. Something she'd visualized 1,000 times in the quiet hours after duty shifts ended. Inside the cockpit, everything clicked into place with the satisfying precision of a puzzle piece finding its home. Her hands moved across the instrument panel like a concert, pianist's fingers dancing across keys, bringing systems online in the exact sequence sheet memorized from technical manuals read by flashlight after lights out. The ejection seat embraced her like an old friend. When she pulled the helmet down over her head, the world suddenly made perfect, crystalline sense. Tower, this is Jet 3, ready for immediate scramble. The radio frequency went dead silent. She could practically hear the confusion crackling through the airwaves. Controllers trying to process an unauthorized voice in a position of authority. Checking rosters, wondering if they'd missed a memo about personnel reassignments. Finally, Jet 3, you are cleared for immediate departure. Godspeed. She advanced the throttles, feeling the twin turbines spool up behind her with a deep, hungry roar that vibrated through her bones like a subwoofer at a rock concert. The other pilots, already halfway down the taxiway in their own aircraft, turned their heads in confusion as she rolled past them to assume the lead position. Who the hell is flying 3? Came a voice over the squadron frequency. Bewilderment overriding professional composure. Call sign tanker, she replied with desert dry humor. Form up on me. Nobody laughed. The weight of the situation had settled over the formation like a lead blanket, transforming casual banter into the focused intensity of professionals preparing for lethal work. Her heads-up display painted the tactical picture in crisp digital clarity. Fast-moving contacts approaching the border at just under the speed of sound. Their trajectory unmistakably hostile, their intentions written in the aggressive geometry of their flight path. She toggled weapon systems to active status, feeling the slight vibration as missiles and cannon came online. Predators awakening from sleep. Squadron Titan formation, she ordered, her voice carrying the natural authority of someone who understood both the mission and the stakes. We're intercepting before they choose their targets. Acknowledge. 2. Affirm. 3. Roger. 4. Copy. 5. Solid. 6. Acknowledged. The 5 fighters behind her clicked into position with mechanical precision, forming a perfect arrowhead that cut through the desert air like a spear thrust. Toward an unseen enemy, she pushed the throttles forward, feeling the afterburners ignite with a kick that pressed her deep into the ejection seat. The aircraft leaped ahead like a thoroughbred given its head, afterburner flames painting twin blue daggers against the pale desert sky. The formation stayed locked behind her, their trust evident in the precision of their positioning. These pilots might not know her name, might not understand who she was or how she'd ended up in this position, but they understood professionalism when they saw it. Range to target decreased with frightening speed as 2 groups of military aircraft raced toward each other across empty wasteland. Her radar warning receiver remained silent. Hey, good sign suggesting the incoming aircraft hadn't achieved weapons lock yet, but that could change in heartbeats. Contact bearing 090, range 40 miles and closing, she transmitted. Multiple bandits, estimated 6 aircraft. Hold weapons cold until they demonstrate hostile intent. The radio crackled with acknowledgements. These were professionals who understood that rules of engagement mattered, even when adrenaline was flooding their systems and every combat instinct was screaming for action. At 20 miles, the enemy formation began to separate. Individual aircraft peeling off to establish attack positions. It was the tactical maneuver she'd been waiting for, the clear evidence of hostile intent that removed any ambiguity about their mission. Weapons free, she announced, her voice carrying the deadly calm of someone who'd visualized this moment 1,000 times. Engage at will. The first enemy missile appeared as a white-hot streak against the blue sky, its smoke trail drawing a line directly toward her aircraft with mathematical precision. She rolled hard left, pulling enough G-force to gray the edges of her vision, then snapped back right to spoil the missile's tracking solution. The weapon detonated harmlessly behind her, its warhead finding nothing but empty air and shattered expectations. Her first shot was perfect, a heat-seeking missile that tracked unerringly toward the lead enemy fighter. The target disappeared in a brilliant fireball that bloomed like a deadly flower against the desert backdrop, debris spinning away in all directions like seeds from an exploding pod. Splash 1, she reported with professional detachment, already acquiring her next target. The sky erupted into a 3-dimensional chess game played at supersonic speeds. Aircraft twisted and turned through impossible maneuvers, leaving contrails that wrote stories of desperation and skill across the heavens. She directed her formation like a conductor leading an orchestra, calling out threats and opportunities with the calm precision of someone who saw the entire battlefield as a single comprehensible picture. 2. You have a bandit on your 6. Brake left and climb. 4. There's a straggler trying to slip below radar. Drop down and intercept. 3. What's your fuel state? You're running hot. 6. Defensive posture. He's trying to bait you into a trap. A second enemy aircraft tried to exploit what looked like an opening in their formation, diving toward what the pilot probably thought was an exposed flak. She caught the movement on her peripheral vision display and turned into the attack, her aircraft's nose tracking the enemy fighter like a hunting rifle following a running deer. Her cannon barked once a short, precise burst that found its mark with devastating effect. The enemy aircraft tumbled out of the sky, trailing smoke and debris, its pilot's ejection seat barely clearing the wreckage before the fighter became a crater in the desert floor. Splash 2, she reported, her voice still carrying that same professional detachment. The battle raged with the intensity of a summer thunderstorm. Every second brought new threats, new opportunities, new decisions that meant the difference between life and death for the pilots under her command. She processed information with the speed of the computers surrounding her, making tactical decisions that would have taken classroom analysts hours to reach. An enemy pilot tried a desperate head-on attack, a game of chicken at closing speeds that exceeded 1,000 miles per hour. Most pilots would have broken off, unwilling to risk the collision. She held her course with the unwavering focus of someone who understood physics and psychology in equal measure, knowing that whoever blinked first would lose the advantage. The enemy pilot blinked. His aircraft rolled away at the last possible second, exposing his vulnerable underside to her weapons. She didn't hesitate. Another burst from the cannon, another fireball, another enemy aircraft falling from the sky. Splash 3, came a voice over the radio. Lieutenant Davis, his tone carrying a mix of exhilaration and terror. He came right at me. But you drew him into. How did you know he would? Focus. 4, she cut him off, not unkindly. The fight's not over, but it almost was. The remaining enemy aircraft had recognized they were facing a force more skilled and better coordinated than they'd anticipated. They broke off the engagement, turning tail and running for the safety of their own airspace at maximum speed. She considered pursuit, then made the tactical decision that would later be studied in advanced flight courses. Let them go, she ordered. Reform on me. We're going home. The acknowledgements that came back over the radio carried a different tone now. Respect earned through competence demonstrated under fire. Relief that they were all still alive. And something else, harder to define, a recognition that something extraordinary had just occurred. The engagement had lasted less than 8 minutes from first contact to final victory. When the smoke cleared and the survivors regrouped, her formation was intact. 6 aircraft that had entered combat under her leadership, and 6 aircraft preparing to return home under her guidance. The landing pattern felt weighted with significance that extended far beyond the simple mechanics of returning aircraft to Earth. She touched down first, her main gear kissing the runway with barely a whisper of rubble on concrete. The other 5 fighters followed in precise sequence, their formation integrity maintained even in this final phase of the mission. As her aircraft rolled toward the parking area, she could see the crowd that had gathered near the flight line. Word of the engagement had obviously spread throughout the base with the lightning speed that characterized military communications networks. Ground crews, maintenance personnel, off-duty pilots, they stood in small clusters, their attention focused on the returning fighters with an intensity that suggested something extraordinary had occurred. The squadron commander was waiting at the base of her ladder when she shut down the engines. Colonel Matthews had the weathered look of a career officer who'd seen enough surprises to be skeptical of anything that deviated from established procedures. His arms were crossed, his expression carefully neutral. She popped the canopy and began the post-flight shutdown sequence with the same methodical attention to detail she brought to every task. Each switch positioned precisely, each system secured according to regulations that had been written in blood and hard experience. That was unconventional, he said as she handed down her helmet to the waiting crew chief. So was losing our lead pilot 5 minutes before a scramble, she replied, swinging her leg over the cockpit rail and beginning her descent. Sometimes you work with what you have instead of what you planned for. Around them, the post-mission chaos was beginning to settle into more familiar rhythms. Maintenance crews swarmed over the returned aircraft, checking for damage and beginning the process of preparing them for the next mission. Weapons loaders were already calculating missile expenditures and planning reload sequences. But something had changed in the way people looked at her. The casual dismissal that had characterized her interactions with flight crews was gone, replaced by a more careful attention that suggested recognition of competence demonstrated under pressure. Colonel Matthews studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he nodded once, a small gesture that somehow carried more weight than a formal commendation. "Debriefing in 30 minutes," he said. "All pilots, including you." By evening, the story had traveled through every corner of the base with the efficiency of wildfire in dry grass. The refueler who'd stepped into the lead fighter and brought everyone home became the subject of conversations in mess halls, maintenance hangars, and officer quarters. Details were embellished with each retelling, but the core facts remained consistent. When the situation demanded leadership, she provided it. The debriefing was unlike anything she'd experienced in her years on base. Seated at the conference table alongside pilots she'd been refueling that morning, she walked the senior officers through her tactical decisions with the same calm precision she'd demonstrated in combat. Why she'd chosen Titan formation, how she'd anticipated enemy maneuvers, the split-second calculations that had turned potential disaster into decisive victory. Captain Morrison sat 3 seats down, his earlier swagger replaced by something more contemplative. He'd been part of the formation she'd led, had followed her orders, had survived because of decisions she'd made. The simple reality of that had rearranged his understanding of the world in ways that would take him weeks to fully process. "Your tactical awareness was exceptional," Colonel Matthews said, leaning back in his chair. "The way you directed for to intercept that straggler while simultaneously coordinating defensive postures for 2 and 6. That's advanced multitasking. That takes years to develop." "I've had time to think about it, sir," she replied simply. "How much flight time do you have?" The question hung in the air. She could have downplayed it, could have avoided drawing attention to the uncomfortable truth of how someone with her capabilities had ended up as ground crew. Instead, she met his eyes directly. 647 hours, sir. Most of it civilian, locked before I enlisted." The silence in the room was deafening. 647 hours was more than many of the junior pilots seated around the table. It was a number that demanded explanation, demanded to be understood in the context of how talent and opportunity sometimes fail to align. "Why didn't this show up in your personnel file?" "It did, sir. Civilian credentials, not military flight school. The assessment was that I'd be more valuable supporting mission-ready pilots than taking up a training slot myself." Translation: the system had looked at her credentials and made a calculation based on efficiency rather than potential. She'd been qualified enough to be useful, but not connected enough to be prioritized. Colonel Matthews' expression suggested he was performing rapid calculations of his own, reassessing every assumption he'd made about personnel management and talent utilization. "We'll be addressing that," he said finally. "In the meantime, you're temporarily assigned to flight status. We'll sort out the permanent details later." In the days that followed, her routine remained largely unchanged. She still rolled fuel hoses, logged maintenance data, and served as a refueling station for thirsty aircraft. But the interactions had evolved in subtle but significant ways. Pilots who'd previously offered only cursory acknowledgements now stopped to ask questions about the engagement, seeking insights from someone who'd proven their tactical competence in actual combat. The casual dismissal had evaporated, replaced by the careful respect that professionals extended to other professionals. Captain Morrison showed up at her station 3 days after the engagement, hands shoved in his pockets, looking uncomfortable in a way that suggested this conversation was costing him something. "I wanted to say thank you," he started, then paused, searching for words. "That maneuver you caught when the bandit was on my 6, I didn't see him until you warned me. I'd be a crater in the desert if you hadn't been paying attention." She nodded acknowledgement, not making it easier for him, not making it harder. "And I wanted to apologize," he continued, "for treating you like furniture, for not seeing what was right in front of me." "You saw what the system told you to see," she replied. "Ground crew, refueler, a role, not a person. That's not entirely on you. It's partially on me," he insisted, "and I'm working on doing better." No official commendation materialized immediately. That would take weeks of paperwork and committee reviews, but the squadron's unofficial hierarchy had already been reorganized. When flight assignments were discussed in informal settings, her call sign appeared on a different list now. Pilots qualified and ready to lead when circumstances demanded it. She never mentioned the change, never drew attention to her new status within the unit's social structure. Respect wasn't something that could be demanded or announced. It was earned through actions and recognized through the quiet acknowledgement of peers who understood the difference between competence and mere credentials. The paperwork slowly ground through military bureaucracy like grain, through an ancient mill, recommendations, assessments, reviews of her civilian flight credentials, discussions about fast-tracking her through military qualification courses. The machinery of the system, once it finally decided to move, was capable of remarkable speed when properly motivated. 6 weeks after the scramble, she received orders transferring her from ground crew to active flight status. Her new assignment came with a promotion, back pay, and the kind of formal recognition that looked impressive in personnel files but meant less than the nod of respect from a fellow pilot. The night before her official transfer, she stood on the flight line after sunset, watching the last patrol return home. The desert air had cooled to something almost comfortable, and the sky was filled with more stars than seemed physically possible. "You thinking about the what, IFS?" She turned to find Lieutenant Davis standing a few feet away, his hands in his pockets, his expression thoughtful. "What if I hadn't been here that day? What if someone else had stepped up? What if I'd second-guessed myself and stayed in my lane?" "Yeah," she admitted. "Sometimes. For what it's worth, I'm glad you were here. And I'm glad you didn't stay in your lane." He paused. "You know what the junior pilots are calling you?" She raised an eyebrow. "The invisible pilot. Because you were right there the whole time. But nobody saw you until the moment it mattered most." She considered that, turning the phrase over in her mind like a smooth stone. "I can live with that," she said finally. The next morning, she walked onto the flight line wearing a flight suit with her new rank insignia, headed toward the briefing room for her first official mission as a pilot rather than as ground crew. The fuel hoses were being handled by someone else now, the maintenance log signed by different hands. But she nodded to the ground crew as she passed, making eye contact, acknowledging them as individuals rather than just roles in the machine, because she understood something that many pilots never learned, that every person on that flight line was essential, that competence existed in unexpected places, and that leadership wasn't about rank or credentials, it was about being ready when the moment demanded it. Captain Morrison fell into step beside her as she walked toward the briefing room. "Ready for your first official patrol?" "Born ready," she replied with a slight smile. "Just took everyone else a while to notice." He laughed, and this time there was no condescension in it, no assumption of superiority, just the easy camaraderie of professionals who'd learned to recognize excellence, regardless of where it appeared. The briefing room was filled with the usual PI mission energy, pilots checking weather reports, reviewing flight plans, engaging in the careful rituals that help manage PI flight nerves. She took her seat among them, no longer invisible, no longer dismissed. Colonel Matthews entered and called the room to attention. "Standard reconnaissance patrol," he began, pulling up the mission details on the main screen. "4-ship formation, 6-hour duration. Nothing complicated." He paused. "Flight lead will be raised." If anyone thought it unusual that someone so recently promoted was leading the patrol, they kept it to themselves. The events of 6 weeks ago had established her credibility in ways that no amount of training could replicate. As they walked toward their aircraft, the morning sun just beginning to heat the tarmac, she felt the weight of responsibility settle over her shoulders like a familiar jacket. Leadership wasn't about having all the answers or never making mistakes. It was about being present, being competent, and being willing to step up when the moment demanded it. Her aircraft waited on the flight line, freshly fueled and maintained by ground crews who now made eye contact when she passed. She ran her hand along the fuselage, feeling the smooth metal warm under her palm, then climbed the ladder to her cockpit, the familiar embrace of the ejection seat, the purposeful dance of hands across instruments, the building roar of turbines spooling to life. "Tower, this is Rays. Flight of 4, ready for departure." "Copy, Rays. You are cleared for takeoff. Winds are calm. Sky is clear. Have a good flight." She advanced the throttles and felt the aircraft begin to roll, gathering speed, approaching that magical moment where physics transforms rolling into flying. The main gear lifted off the runway, and suddenly she was airborne, climbing into the clear desert sky with 3 other fighters tucked into perfect formation behind her. This was where she belonged. This was what she'd been working toward through every tank of fuel pumped, every maintenance lot completed, every hour spent studying technical manuals when she should have been sleeping. Not because she needed to prove anything to the system that had overlooked her, but because she knew her own capabilities and refused to let anyone else's limited vision define what she could become. The mission was routine, exactly as briefed. No scrambles, no emergencies, just 6 hours of professional flying and vigilant watching. But routine missions were the foundation that prepared you for the extraordinary ones. Every hour logged, every procedure practiced, every formation flown built the skills that would matter when chaos erupted. As they returned to base in the late afternoon sun, she keyed her radio one final time. Flight. This is lead. Good flying today. Dismissed to post-flight. The acknowledgements came back crisp and professional. Another mission completed. Another day of being exactly who she'd always known she could be. And somewhere down on the flight line, a young airman was probably rolling fuel hoses, logging maintenance data, and dreaming of something more. She made a mental note to pay attention, to keep her eyes open for talent hiding in unexpected places, to remember what it felt like to be invisible, because the best leaders were the ones who remembered where they came from and made sure that others didn't have to fight quite as hard for their opportunities. She brought her fighter in for landing, touching down with practiced precision, and taxied toward the parking area where ground crews waited to service her aircraft for the next mission. The circle was complete, but the story was just beginning. If this story resonated with you, if you believe that true capability needs no introduction and that leadership is proven in the moment it's demanded, then hit that like button and subscribe to Silent Warriors. We bring you real stories of quiet professionals who led when it counts, who step up when others step back, and who prove that excellence can emerge from the most unexpected places. Share this story with someone who needs to hear that their moment is coming, that preparation meets opportunity, and that being overlooked doesn't mean being incapable. Subscribe now, because every week we deliver stories that inspire, challenge, and remind you that heroes don't always wear the uniforms you expect.